Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Hi, everybody. This is Mark Snyderman, and welcome to the Think Factory podcast. I am your host for today, and I am super excited to have an old friend, an old Dickinsonian alumni, Paul Yater, on the podcast. He is the Chief Information Officer and the head of HR for 84 Lumber, as two mighty big titles for one person. So we're excited to talk about that, talk about the journey. We'll even throw in some, we promise we won't talk too much about days at Dickinson. I can't remember most of them anyway. Paul probably has a better memory than me, but you know, most of mine were blacked out. But that's okay. It kind of happens. Uh, hey, Paul, nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Looking forward to catching up, and thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. So why don't you talk a little bit about, your journey? Because it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I always say like I had a strange journey because I was a lawyer and then became a business guy. And I kind of at one point was chief operating officer and general counsel. So I gave myself advice. And now you're chief information officer and kind of a chief people officer, I guess you could use the title. So it's kind of interesting. How did that kind of play out? Because most of your career was CIO kind of
Yeah,
IT side, right?
I mean, it's interesting. So I don't even have a technology degree, right? We're liberal arts guys. We'll talk about
Yeah.
that. But I did some programming in high school, but got into consulting early on in my career, and that sort of led me down the technology track, and worked my way up, and did a lot of work, and eventually worked my way back home to Pittsburgh, and did some interesting stuff, and eventually worked my way up to number two at a couple of places, and got a CIO role, and then came here to 84, and it was really about IT transformation. Come in, build a team, put together a strategy, figure out how to leverage technology, and get the technology in the hands of our people and our associates to serve our customers better. And about a year and a half into that, we had turned over the HR role. I report directly to the chief operating officer, and I could see sort of the strain and the stress that vacancy was putting on him. And I'm like, hey, look, we need you focused on helping the mothership and running the organization. If you're willing to take a chance on me, I'll take a shot at it. Like, let me try this
Yeah.
HR thing. He's like, hey, you've built some really good relationships with our stores and our people, and I like what you've done on the IT side. Our people are our most important asset. Yeah, come on, let's go get more contemporary, more modern on the HR side as well. So that's how that happens. I guess I sort of volunteered and got lucky. Then 7 years later, I'm still doing both. Running HR in a pandemic was not on my bucket list, I would admit, but doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I would say is great teams and great people on both sides. I couldn't do these two roles without really good folks on both sides, on the technology and the HR side, that really keep us in the right places on both sides. And I just sort of try to get barriers out of the way, get them what they need, and support them and help them do the right things for our folks. So.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I don't know that I don't honestly don't know that I've ever heard anybody hold those two roles, but they're a lot more tied together than people would really think, right? Because of I look at it as because you're doing transformational IT, you need so much buy-in and so much on the cultural side that I think you probably are adding. You're probably being able to like really move things ahead in ways that I think a lot of CIOs
it,
probably
it
can't.
it does help if you think about the change management and the training side and the communication
Yeah.
side of it, and what are we doing and why are we doing it. It helps there, certainly on the people side and what we're doing. I think it does help. When I need that HR partner, I knew who to talk to. I gotta sort of reach across the table and
Yeah.
and figure that out. But yeah, it has helped. I think to a degree. And as we think about AI and how that's going to change, it's certainly going to have
Yeah.
technology and human resources and people impact. So I think it's I do think well positioned, and I enjoy it, and it keeps it interesting for sure.
Now, did you go on how much like HR? How much have you studied to be an HR, like a head of an HR now? Because that was kind of
I
like
would
because
tell
it's
you,
so much later in your career. Like
yeah,
you're
I
not
mean,
gonna,
it's really asking good questions, and just some of that critical thinking skills, and
yeah,
just, hey, look, why are we doing this? Hey, let's go attack benefits and figure out what we're doing, and how do we negotiate it, and what does it mean, and what do we need to be able to provide to our associates, and what's happening with healthcare costs and trends, some of that kind of side. On the recruiting side, that's probably been a big piece of the focus, and okay, look, let's go talk to our partners on the recruiting side, and where do we find people, and how do we build feeder programs, and
hmm
what are we doing with our internship program, and what does our training and development look like, and just really digging in and rolling up your sleeves and asking questions and getting people what they need. And and listening. I would say,
Yeah.
God gave me two ears and one mouth, and I like to use them in that ratio. And ask lots of cute questions, be curious, and just figure it out. I mean, yeah, have I gone to some kind of executive training for HR? Or am I SHRM certified? No, I'm not. But I've always said, even on the IT side, I consider myself a business guy who knows how to run an IT function and
Right.
manage a budget, manage a department, manage people, build teams, and get people what they need, get barriers out of the way, and get buy-in, right? So try to do some of the similar things on the HR side.
No, it's cool. I think it's super interesting to see, that kind of change in a career. I think everybody's career kind of evolves, in
Yep.
so many different ways. It always goes in directions you never really, you probably didn't really think it was going to end up.
Yeah, it's never
You know,
linear, right? It's definitely never
it's
linear.
it's it's far from linear. It's as jagged as can be for some of us. So I guess let's start talking. I guess we'll like, kind of split things up because you have this IT piece and the people piece. So we'll kind of talk a little bit on both sides. But when you think about the future of tech, right? Obviously it's moving. It's always moving, right? I would say it feels like it's moving at a light speed that wasn't there, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Sure,
It was
sure.
moving, but it wasn't moving at the speed it's moving at now. Like, what's keeping you up at night? Where are you saying, oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with that at 84 Lumber? What does that mean for our business?
Yeah, I mean, we're going through a point of sale modernization. So our point of sale solution runs in all 320 of our stores, and we've got 7,600 people out there using it every day. And we're going through a transformation there and modernizing
Geesh.
that and taking it from some old custom developed platform to a new Python platform and things like that. So I'd say that's probably the biggest transformational thing that we're working on right now. Clearly AI is out there, and how do you think about AI and what can it
Yeah.
do? And I really think about that as just another tool in the toolbox. To be quite honest with you, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and somebody used a really good analogy that I'm going to steal. Somebody said, think about AI as a microwave, not your iPhone. A microwave didn't replace your stove. It didn't replace your toaster. It's just something else that you put in your kitchen that you use to supplement what you do. Your iPhone replaced your phone, your camera, your map, your calculator, and everything else.
Right.
But that's probably not what AI is going to do. It's probably going to be this assistant that you put into the kitchen that helps you do things better. So just trying to figure out how to leverage that and where can we use it, and obviously do it thoughtfully and securely and those kind of things as well. But those are probably some of the bigger things we're trying to think about and figure out.
So do you stay ahead mostly by going to conferences and things like that? Because it's so hard to read at this point.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
it's
lean
changing all the time.
Yeah, lean a lot on vendor partners too, sort of
Yeah.
strategy and road mapping sessions like quarterly business reviews, like here's what we're
Cool.
thinking, what are you thinking? Interesting things like I'm on a customer advisory board for our healthcare plan, and they do a lot of sharing with their customers about what they're thinking and how they think AI is going to change healthcare. So it's just sort of an interesting piece of where you
Yeah.
try to stay connected and try to learn. Read is the other one. I'm a voracious reader and try to stay current and figure out what's going on. I mean, it's changing very fast, but how are others using it? What are the use cases people are doing? You really want something that's going to solve business problems. It's not just this bright shiny object out there to say, hey, we're doing this with
hmm
AI. It's how can we leverage it? Where does it make sense? And where should we focus our resources and
Yeah. I
pilot
mean,
and try and learn?
I think it's great to be thoughtful about it because I think so many people are just jumping on, the proverbial bandwagon of,
Sure, sure.
hey, I have to use AI. I better use it. I better do something with it, because everybody's doing it. Well, I don't. What does that
Sure.
mean? Well, do you
Yep.
even know what AI is? Do you know how to, where you're going to deploy it? So it's interesting, working in the law side of my world. AI is like we're still trying to figure out how you're going to do it in a manner that is going to be secure.
Sure.
Where are you gonna play with it? There's been attorneys that have been disbarred in the state of New York because they used AI to write
Sure.
briefs, and it's like you're like, what
Yep.
is wrong with you people? Like, I
Yep.
think your stolen analogy is really good, right?
Yep. Yeah. I
It,
mean, you think about, so I mean, and I'm not a lawyer, I just play one on TV, right? I mean, if you think
yeah,
about it, it should be able to help you sort of assimilate all that data into something that's, consumable. Not that it's going to go write your brief for you, but if you're trying to, got all these data sources of things you're trying to bring together and figure out how you're going to navigate it and what you want to say about
yeah,
it, it seems like it ought to be a pretty good tool to be able to help you do that in an optimized way. But
you would think.
then you'll use your brain and your legal expertise and your knowledge to figure out
Yeah,
how to make the
it's all
case, right?
it's all 80/20, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's the whole world's 80/20, right?
Yep,
If it can help you get 80% of the way there, use the 20%, use it as an 80% tool and use the 20% as your brain that it'll never know.
sure. Of course.
So, uh, you know, What's the, as the head of HR, what do you think is your biggest challenge? Is it, is it on the recruiting side? Because I know that's most people, recruiting is a huge issue these days, and I'm
Yep.
not sure if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's our most important side of it. That's hard to say. It's
Yeah.
certainly the focus area. That's probably a better way to say it, right? I think, we are very much a promote from within company. About 90, more than 96% of our store leadership team started life as this manager trainee, which is really our entry level role. And we've got a really, I'll call it a world-class training program. Like we would tell you, and what we say is you don't have to know anything about the construction industry or how to swing a hammer or the difference between a two by four or a sheet of plywood, right? We can teach you, we
Hmm.
can train you. If you're driven, you're willing to bet on yourself. We've got training programs that'll come teach you this thing. Um, so I think it is finding those people that fit our culture, fit that profile that we're looking for. Because we're not looking for a ton of experience. It's an entry level position, but it's really trying to find that those behavioral characteristics and the type of person that fits our culture, that we can teach and mold and train and give them this opportunity. Matching that candidate and that person with the opportunity that we've got is the magic that we need to find happening every day. So.
Yeah. And are you guys doing most of your training online or using like a learning management system, or are you doing a
It's
lot
a
of
it's a high
inside
it's a hybrid both.
hybrid?
We've got an on-site training facility here that's booked 50 out of 52 weeks a year. We probably bring, I don't know, north of 1,200 people through that. 1,200 of our associates do that every year. And then we've got a learning management solution with all kinds of different,
Yeah.
self-paced and, learning modules and things like that. So yeah, a learning and development team that creates that content, manages those programs, and continues to build out, learning and development and training from everything from communications to leadership to, specific job function kind of training. So yeah, we've got a lot of focus on that too.
Yeah, see, I think there you have a huge advantage as the CIO and knowing tech, as you're doing HR because there's so much push on HR these days. Because as I deal with a lot of HR departments,
Sure, of course.
and they have so much push on them to add tech to do all this tech stuff that they have, and they're like, in the dark ages of tech, right? They're barely using Excel, and they're being told, you have to deploy this HRIS, you have to deploy an applicant tracking system and all these
Sure.
things. And they're like, we don't know what we're doing.
Yep. Yep. We just did a new applicant tracking system last year. So yep, we'd
Yeah.
eat our own dog food. Again, get
Yeah.
the right people together and pull the two teams together and try and figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
it still takes people and it still takes, roll up your sleeves and work on all that stuff to figure it out. But as long as you've got the same goals and the same objectives, hopefully they can come together and, get the right results.
And what do you think your human capital risks are over the next few years? Like,
It's
I know it's
interesting. Yeah, that's a good
kind of
question.
a
I
left
mean,
field question.
I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it to an industry level. I mean, there
Yeah.
aren't enough people in the trades, right? So if you think
Yeah.
about what we're doing, I mean, we're really building. We're connected to the housing market, obviously. I mean, we supply building
Hmm.
materials to large builders and contractors across the country, and they're building houses and building shelter for building the American dream is what we like to call it. And there just aren't enough people in the trades right now between electricians and plumbers and carpenters and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's really going to be this. It has been a challenge and probably will continue to be this challenge. I think
Hmm.
some of the things that we try to do is communicate to folks that say, "Hey, look, a college track is a track and an opportunity, but there are also other opportunities to build a career and really build a rewarding lifestyle and a rewarding life." And think about some of these other things. So I think that that's one that concerns us is, hey, look, there's not enough people in this industry to keep it going
Hmm.
over time if we don't continue to train and build and build that pipeline of future talent. Um, I think the other side is, making sure that we've got this thing built for the next generation too, as we, turn over, aging and all the 5 generations in the workforce and things like that. Do you have the next store manager out there? Do you have the next leader in the
Hmm.
organization and continue to build those succession plans and make sure that we are building for the future? I mean, we're still growing and opening stores. I think, the other side of the housing industry is there is quite frankly a shortage of housing in the U.S. right now. I mean, we're somewhere in the 2.5 to 3 million houses short. Every year from World War II until 2008, we built about 1.1 single family homes in the US. And from
Hmm.
2008 for the next 12 years, you never got back over a million. So you have this
Yeah.
gap of housing that's not out there. Now you've got affordability problems, you got rate problems, you got lots of challenges and headwinds in the industry relative to housing. But at the end of the day, it's a math problem that says you got more people than housing, so And anybody that's got a sub 3 mortgage probably isn't trading their mortgage out for some,
Right.
6 or 7% mortgage, right? So you got all those factors at work that say, hey, look, maybe your only option is to build something, right? And we try to support that and support our customers and their customers that are building homes and trying to do that. So all the people
That's
it takes
great.
around that and all the processes around that is what we're focused on and trying to think about from a human capital perspective.
What's been I don't know, what's the hardest people decision you've had to make in the past year?
Hardest people decision. Man, that's a good one.
It's a Dickinson
I'm I'm
question.
I'm gonna go back to COVID. That's not in the last
Yeah,
year, but I'm gonna go back to
that's okay.
COVID.
No, that's
I
okay.
think
Yeah.
it got so crazy and we pulled back so fast because we weren't sure what was going to happen. And we probably cut a little bit too deep. And then if you know anything about, if you tried to build anything or know anything about the construction
Yeah.
industry, right, your house became your home, your office, your school, your gym, your
Yeah, it
everything
was
in the
everything.
world, right?
Yeah.
And everybody was doing that as projects they had put on hold and expanding and whatever. And it went, you didn't know what was going to happen. The world was coming to an end in March, right? And then it became, okay, look, man, this thing's on a rocket to the moon. So
Yeah.
really trying to make sure we were staffed appropriately, and we didn't know what was going to happen because you were trying to manage the business and figure out if you were going to be able to survive and some of those kind of things. And then, a couple of months into it, it just took off like crazy from a building materials, and then you had supply chain challenges. So, I think really trying to manage through those people, and at the same time, you were trying to protect lives, right? I mean, you were really trying to think
Yeah.
about how do you staff these stores? We were emergency. We were a whatever we called it back then, where essential function, right?
Yeah. Essential
Um,
functions, yeah, critical
um,
functions or whatever they were
yeah,
saying.
whatever it was. So we had to have people in stores and be able to do it, and we were cleaning and creating PPE and giving everybody what they needed to be safe, but be able to serve our customers. So those were some challenging times and challenging decisions, and making sure we were protecting livelihoods and protecting lives and navigating all those challenges like everybody else. But those were probably some of the more challenging things that we've done in the last couple of years, and then coming out of it, just staying prepared.
Yeah, were you at home a lot, or were you in the
We were,
office,
we were,
or
we were, we were, we were early back to the
yeah,
office, but until we were Pennsylvania, and we weren't allowed in for,
yeah,
we
you
were
weren't
trying to
allowed,
comply.
don't
Yeah,
go on the highways, don't go
yeah, right,
anywhere.
exactly. So I mean, we tried to navigate that with policy and do the right thing. And this is a blue collar, roll up your sleeves. It's a physical nature of this business.
Yeah,
It's building materials. We're loading and unloading freight and delivering to job sites and all that kind of stuff. So it was a challenge to navigate that and figure that out. So, but yes, we are pretty much in. I mean, we've certainly been back since then, and we are a roll up your sleeves, get her done kind of
yeah.
place.
This is just like organizational question I was thinking about because I see it in different organizations. Like, do you guys keep safety under HR,
I
or
do.
is safety its own?
I
Yeah,
have a director of safety, and a manager of safety. But yeah,
yeah.
safety is within HR for us.
Yeah, because I always look to see, like, I always think it should be under HR, but
Hmm.
I've seen some organizations not put it there, and I always think it's a mistake because I just feel like it needs that removal,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
and
closest to people and protecting it, and
yeah,
having people feel safe to be able to report security concerns and employee
yeah,
relations concerns and things like that. I think that you know and we do safety audits and things like that out of HR as well, and trying to stay compliant and protect our folks every day. I mean,
right,
because it's a dangerous business, right? I mean, there's heavy and
yeah,
high stuff, and you're lifting, and we've got saws going because we got manufacturing stuff that we do as well. So it is, it's a challenge every day to make sure that people are doing the right thing and protecting themselves, right? So we do
yeah.
take it very seriously.
So let's jump over to sort of the Dickinson life and the
Sure,
liberal arts
sure.
education. How do you see that? Because I mean, everybody talks about so all the stigma around, well, liberal arts education doesn't prepare you for real jobs. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you and I spent a lot of time on collaboration projects and things like that. I
Yeah,
think it really taught me how to think. And I think that it was those critical thinking and analysis skills, right? I mean, we were looking at things. I mean, you and I come from the same major, right? We were policy and
yeah,
management studies majors. We were looking at it from okay, here's a political policy. What are the implications of that? Then what are the ethical concerns and that side of the coin, and then the economic side of it, and really trying to
hmm,
say, okay, here are real no kidding solutions. Here are the pros and cons of those solutions. Here are recommendations, thinking upstream and downstream, communication skills. I think being able to write effectively and communicate effectively is what we did. A lot of collaboration. I think a lot of the group project stuff that we came out of, you learned how to work with a lot of different people and lead different folks. Think about things from a different perspective, I think is another piece.
Yeah.
Really quality
I mean,
people. I mean,
you got to work with me. I mean, that in and of itself is enough.
yeah, it was all good. It was all good. It was a lot of fun times, right? And even
Yeah.
studying abroad. I mean, I never went to Dickinson thinking I was going to study abroad, and I spent my junior year
Yeah.
in Italy. And you're studying an industrial labor relations class, and the train's on strike today. You didn't really understand what labor relations look like, or I'm in a global economic class, and what the lira or euro was trading for meant how much was it going to cost me for lunch today, and can I get on the train to go somewhere
Yeah.
this weekend, right? You really learn that stuff. And I think that just, you sort of take that global perspective and, just wonderful education, wonderful professors, wonderful folks like you that I've met and stayed close to and built great relationships with. And I think it helped prepare me. How about
Yeah.
you? I guess I'll take your perspective and your point of view too, right?
Yeah. I always say like the liberal arts education means that no matter what room you're in, what conversation's going on, you can touch it, right? Because it forced you to take an arts class, a music class, an economics class, political science, science. You had to take classes across the board, and that set of requirements puts me in. Anytime I'm in a room, I'm never at a loss. I mean,
Sure.
I'm probably not at a loss because I talk a lot anyway, but there's always a touch point back to something that I learned at Dickinson, which always amazes me how much we actually covered and how much I remember from that
Yeah, I
point of it.
agree.
Because, like I said, I really like the nights are pretty dark.
Sure, sure.
There's- the
Yeah, I mean, I would even argue, hey, that's maybe how some IT guy ends up running HR is because you take
yeah
broad perspectives and you think about it, and you've got a diverse background and experience. And I mean, I did my MBA at Pitt while I was working at Heinz, and so I'll say rounded out or maybe
yeah
broadened and depth deepened some of those skills as well. But certainly, I would say the foundations are built in that liberal arts education and the experiences that I had there and the things that I learned and the approach and the way to think and the way to grow and learn, right? College in general, but certainly that liberal arts background and
yeah.
experience.
I think that Dickinson in particular, like it kind of gave us that. We had those seminars that we would do, like
Yep.
that senior seminar in
Yep.
policy management. I mean, not a lot of undergraduate students do that level of work.
Yep.
Are,
Exactly.
are pushed to that are pushed to that level. I mean, we were that last paper we I mean that last seminar we did with the paper, and then wasn't Judge Jones, wasn't he one of our like
I,
who's I
he,
think he's now the president,
he's the
right?
president now. Yep.
Yeah, he was a judge back then, and they had him
Yes, he
come in,
was.
and it was him and one of the senators, I think, were both in the room just
I think you're right.
abusing us over our
Yep.
presentation.
Yep.
We did minimum wage, right?
Yeah, it was policy. It was poverty in America was the topic, and what
Poverty
were
in
all the
America, yeah,
how are we going to how are we going to
yeah,
solve that poverty problem, right? So
yeah. Yeah, it was crazy.
it's
It is
crazy.
like you have like these flashes of like what it was like it's going back to it. But we did have we had some good professors, some good
Yeah,
students.
I mean, I even think back to some of the religious things. Like whenever we did the course on ethics, and we looked at Star Trek and utilitarianism, the needs of the many
Yeah.
outweigh the needs of the few, and Field of Dreams, and some of those things that we did with some of that cool pop culture stuff, and Tracy
Oh, that's right.
Chapman, all those
Yeah.
kind of things. I remember some of those days fondly, and how it made you think, and really connected you to something that has stuck with me 30 whatever years later,
Yeah.
right?
Which is amazing, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
for
so I
sure.
do think, yeah, I think we can. I love to dispel the myths of the liberal arts education isn't worth it, and you should only be focused on a business or something else.
Sure. Some
And
kind of
my
practical.
answer is practical, right? And my
Yeah.
answer is always the same, right? Hey, we all do fine. We all
That's
find
right.
our way, and
Yep.
I think you said it best, which is, it really is a way to learn and a way to communicate and how to work with other people. And we did a good, you get a good basis in that.
Yep. No
And
question.
in the end, that's what work is, right?
For sure, for sure. I
There-
always
There's
say
a,
there's
there's
not
a
many things you can do on your own these days, right? It takes a team, it takes collaboration. You got to work with a lot of people and sell a lot of ideas and convince a lot of people of what you need them to
yeah,
do and how you're all headed in the right direction and rowing in the same direction. And how do you
right.
how do you influence? How do you get people on board? And how do you listen? And how do you figure out the right solutions in the path you want to navigate? Right.
Yeah, I was telling somebody just before, I said, anybody that thinks they don't sell all day isn't really in business.
Right. For
You're
sure.
selling at all times, whether you're
That-
doesn't have to be a salesman to be selling. You're always selling.
that's right. For sure.
Yeah. So, what's one book, either fiction or nonfiction,
Hmm.
that shaped your career or your leadership style?
I would say I'm a big Simon Sinek guy. So I would say
I knew it.
the virtuous circle, right? I always
Yep.
think your why. Like I tell people in general, like it is about your why. It's not what you do or how you do it, it's why you do it. And if you can't get
Yep.
out of bed and you're not passionate and connected to what you're doing and why you're doing it, it really doesn't work for you. So I'm a believer, and I think that's probably one of the more foundational ones, and I believe in that one. And that's one I go back to very frequently and sort of try to stay connected to. And it's guidance I give as I talk to other folks too.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's my answer always as well. It is, I had the fortune of going to see him. He spoke at a town hall in New York City. It was actually like 2 days before COVID shut the world down.
Oh, geez.
I was up in Manhattan. And it was already starting to get like kind of like weird. Like you took the train in and there was like kind of this like weird ghost town feel because people were already starting to kind of hide. And I
Sure,
was like, I'm not missing Simon Sinek live. I'm going. And I mean, he was great and everything you wanted to hear from him. It was right after the Infinite Game had come out, so it was kind of
sure.
all around that. But he is the like kind of the ultimate optimist. But it does. There's a lot of stuff that resonates as a when you're leading companies and you're leading people. He really hits the kind of hits those points that you can kind of drive down and people they can get it, right?
Yep.
It's
He
it's
very much
it's
connects it to something that's very logical, and it is an
yeah,
easy get, right? It's not so esoteric in some model that you're trying to
yeah,
connect to that takes, brain, we
it's
got to
too
fry
long.
brain cells to figure it out, right? It really
Yeah,
is gee, that makes a lot of sense, and I can
yeah.
understand that, and that makes, I think he's very practical.
So if you could go back to our senior seminar and tell young Paul or young Mark something from your career that they were going to learn or something that they should have learned back then that they didn't learn, what would it be?
Man, that's a great one. That's a great one. I think so my internship in my guess it was my senior year was with a stockbroker. Like I thought I wanted to be the Wall Street guy,
Yeah,
right? And I did it with a financial advisor in town, and it taught me about the market, and it taught me about investing, and it taught me the importance of the 401k. And my first job out of college was 401k plan administration before I got into consulting. And I think that was that prepped me, and I would say, yep, do that. I started to invest now. My new one is real estate. Like I've become so my
okay.
the other book I didn't tell you is I've become a really big Kiyosaki guy, like the
Oh,
Robert
really?
Kiyosaki, and
Yeah,
I think this real estate thing. I wish I would have invested in real estate earlier. If that's what I would guide myself is say invest in real estate a little bit earlier in your career. And it took a leap of faith. I finally was able to talk my wife into it a couple during COVID actually, and she's like, "We're
yeah.
never going to be able to use these places. We're traveling too much with the kids and all that stuff." And finally did it. And I think I would have done that a little earlier in my life. And that's probably the coulda, shoulda, woulda I would give myself.
Yep, I think that's a good one. I always, I think I would go back and tell us that everything takes longer than you think it will.
Sure, of course,
Like,
of
I
course.
think that was a lesson that it took me a long time to learn, like longer than it probably should have. I just kept thinking, like, because I was so like driven, like everything's just going to happen. And, I went to law school and then they get my first job as a lawyer and I went straight in house. And it was like, and everything was just kind of kept kind of rolling. And then you
Sure.
realize, you know what, it takes a long time to get where you really want to get to.
Yep. Nope, that's fair. I mean, I think the other thing is there's some good advice that I did get. I thought about going straight into business school after Dickinson, and
Yeah,
somebody said, "Hey, look, maybe get some work experience, right? You'll probably take more out of it, bring more to it, and be able to
100%.
absorb it better. And oh, by the way, you'll probably get somebody to pay for it." And both of those things were true. So that was good advice. Now nothing wrong with going straight in, and things
Yeah,
change and all that kind of stuff. So that was another piece of advice that I was given that I would say has helped. Maybe one more, if you let me keep answering that one question,
sure.
is find a mentor. I mean, I think I've been very fortunate to have some
Yeah.
really good mentors in my career and be connected to people who are really willing to teach and listen and let me ask questions and not look stupid outside the room and come vent and just be able to navigate and learn. I think that's very important, and that's one thing I would tell young folks is to say go
Yeah.
pick the right organization, but then find somebody that you can really lean on. And probably not your direct supervisor. You'll learn a lot from your manager or your
Hmm.
supervisor or whoever, but find some kind of mentor that. And a lot of folks have formal mentoring programs and things like that these
Yeah.
days. But I
Do
think
you guys have that
we do
like
have
a
a couple
formal
of things that we
mentoring?
do. Like we do have.
Yeah,
I wish we had more of it, but we do have it in a couple of areas that we're trying to strengthen. But and we do a lot with internships and some of those kind of things too. And then we sort of partner up with our manager trainee has some very close folks that they work with from an on the job training perspective too.
that's
That's
great.
really that mentor as well. So I think that's something that I've been fortunate in my career that's really helped me to grow and develop and learn.
Yeah, I think if you know you have to find those mentors even later in life. Like, I went and as soon as when I kind of left corporate America and kind of started this venture group and everything that I have going on, like I really wanted to find somebody. I had to find a mentor, and that was a
Sure.
serial entrepreneur, like that
Yep.
kind of knows like here's how you do this,
Yeah,
and
here's the ups and
kind of
downs, and what am I doing about
like
Series A funding, and what does that look
like
like, and
what does this
how do you
stuff look
manage a
like? Because it's
startup? Yeah, right.
yeah, it's a lot of it's and it's patience and it's riding the storms that just keep going, but it's a lot of fun.
Sure.
So this is great. You have any last words you'd like to give the audience?
No, I think it's been fun catching up with you.
Yeah,
We've stayed connected over the years, and I'm glad we got a
yeah.
chance to do this. And I look fondly back on our Dickinson days, and I try to go back to campus and I speak at a couple of classes and do some things. We've done some. I've actually got two interns have started this week with us from Dickinson, so I
Oh,
try
that's
to give
awesome.
back to the old
Yeah,
alma mater and stay connected and pay it forward in any way that I can. So very fortunate to have met you and stayed connected. So glad we were able to
yeah,
do this and catch up. And thanks for the time and. It's fun to reminisce a little bit.
yeah. Me too. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you. And that's all for today from the Think Factory. Thanks, and have a great day.